Florida is being flooded, not with rain, but with millions of genetically modified mosquitoes. Released by the biotech firm Oxitec, these bugs are designed to mate, spread a lethal gene, and collapse wild mosquito populations. But scientists are raising alarms. Could this trigger unintended consequences? Hybrid super-mosquitoes, gene leaks, ecosystem collapse? With little public oversight and quiet federal approval, critics say this could be the biggest biological experiment in U.S. history. Is this the future of disease control or a dangerous game of genetic roulette? The experiment has already begun, and most Americans don't even know it's happening. 5 million mutants in the Sunshine State. It started with a few boxes, quiet, unassuming containers placed in backyards and open fields in Florida. No buzzing alarms, no government press conferences. Yet from those boxes, 144,000 genetically modified mosquitoes took flight in 2021. By 2023, that number had grown to over 3 million. Their mission? To breed, but not to survive. The company behind them was Oxitec, a British biotech firm with a vision: use gene editing to crash wild mosquito populations from the inside. These modified males are designed to seek out wild females. When they mate, their daughters die before reaching adulthood. Only sons survive, and they too carry the same lethal gene. These are not your average bugs. They carry a lab-built gene called OX5034. This gene stops female offspring from developing, cutting the chain of transmission for diseases like Zika, dengue, and yellow fever. Because only female mosquitoes bite, and only they spread viruses, this strategy targets the problem at its root. "We're not killing mosquitoes with poison," said an Oxitec researcher. "We're changing the math." What makes this so shocking is how quietly it happened. Most Floridians had no idea it was going on. No visible swarms, no dramatic changes. But to the scientific community, this was a historic experiment. The first major open-air release of genetically engineered insects in the United States. A test that could shape the future of global health. "It's not just a science experiment," said one biotech analyst. "It's the beginning of a new kind of biological warfare against disease." But not everyone welcomed this quiet invasion. Long before the first modified mosquito took flight, a storm had already been brewing. The battleground wasn't the lab. It was Florida's front porches, city council meetings, and late-night newsrooms. When Floridians said no, the resistance started early, long before the first release. In fact, as far back as 2011, Oxitec proposed releasing genetically modified mosquitoes in the Florida Keys. That's when the backlash began. Residents were furious, not just at the idea of lab-created insects, but at the feeling of being part of an unasked experiment. More than 230,000 people signed petitions to stop the release. Protests sprang up across South Florida. Activists warned of Franken mosquitoes and unknown ecological risks. Headlines screamed phrases like "robo-bugs in paradise" and "science gone wild." For many, it wasn't about bugs, it was about control. "We're being used as test subjects," one resident said at a town hall, "and no one asked us first." Public meetings turned heated. Community members asked tough questions. What happens if the modified genes spread? Could it affect the food chain? What if something goes wrong and there's no way to reverse it? The opposition wasn't just emotional, it was logical. And yet, despite the wave of public resistance, regulators moved forward. In 2020, the EPA gave Oxitec the green light. That approval, many say, felt like a betrayal. Local governments were caught in the middle, torn between public fear and federal approval. Some officials claimed they were pressured. Others simply lacked the scientific background to understand the full implications. But in the end, the release moved forward. Quietly, legally, and deeply divisive. "They didn't just release mosquitoes," said one Florida environmentalist. "They released distrust into the air, into the water, into us." So who built these biobugs? How are they designed to die? And can any system be this precise without cracks? To understand the real stakes, we need to look inside the lab, where genes are stitched, sorted, and sent into the wild. Birth of a bioweapon? Behind the scenes, the process is like something out of science fiction, but it's real. And it begins with Aedes aegypti, the yellow fever mosquito. It's one of the deadliest vectors on Earth, spreading viruses across continents. Oxitec scientists have turned this insect into a tool of control, using gene editing to change its reproductive code. At the heart of this process is the OX5034 gene, a synthetic sequence inserted into mosquito eggs using microinjection tools smaller than grains of salt. This gene causes female offspring to die in the larval stage, before they can bite or breed. Males survive, but carry the gene to the next generation. "We're breaking the cycle without chemicals," said one lead engineer. "We're using the mosquito against itself." To track the modified bugs, scientists also insert a fluorescent marker, a red glow that comes from a gene borrowed from coral. Under lab lights, the modified mosquitoes glow like embers. This helps researchers monitor their spread in the wild and distinguish them from wild types. It's genetic surveillance in real time. But before release, these insects go through an intense sorting process. Males and females are separated by size. Sexual dimorphism makes the males slightly smaller. Every batch is tested, verified, and sorted again. Mistakes are possible, but rare, the company claims. Still, critics ask, what happens if even a few females slip through? What if they survive long enough to bite? The lab insists it's impossible. The world isn't so sure. "It's not science fiction anymore," one geneticist said. "It's science fact. And we're writing the next chapter, line by line." We now know how the gene is built, but how does it work in real life? Once the mosquitoes leave the lab and fly into the streets, the next chapter reveals a deeper design, one that kills by birth. Genetically modified death by design. The science behind Oxitec's mosquito isn't just smart, it's lethal by design. Once released, the genetically modified males do exactly what nature taught them to do: seek out wild females and mate. But the moment they do, they pass on a gene that acts like a built-in time bomb. Their daughters never live long enough to bite. Their sons survive, only to spread the same genetic curse. It's a kill switch that's biological, not chemical. The key is in how the OX5034 gene is programmed. It uses protein fragments borrowed from E. coli bacteria and the herpes simplex virus. Yes, the same family of virus that causes cold sores. These protein elements are harmless to humans, but when inserted into mosquito DNA, they become a death sentence for female larvae. To keep the modified mosquitoes alive in the lab, scientists feed them tetracycline, a common antibiotic. This acts as an antidote, blocking the gene's effects and allowing both males and females to grow normally. But once the bugs are released into the wild, where tetracycline isn't present, the gene activates and does its job. It kills, silently, genetically, and precisely. Oxitec claims the gene disappears within 2 to 3 months after release. That's the promise: a short burst of genetic disruption, followed by natural fade-out. And in trial zones, results show the gene's presence does drop sharply over time. But not completely. A few fragments linger. And what they might do, no one fully knows. Genes don't ask permission, one bioethicist warned. Once they're out, they don't come back. "This isn't a pesticide," said an Oxitec spokesperson. "It's precision extinction. Targeted, contained, and temporary." But why go to such extreme lengths? Why risk altering the genetic code of an entire species? The answer lies in one mosquito, small, quiet, and more dangerous than any predator on Earth. The most dangerous mosquito on Earth. It's easy to underestimate Aedes aegypti. It's small, quiet, and makes up only 4% of Florida's mosquito population. But that tiny percentage is responsible for nearly 100% of mosquito-borne diseases in the state. Zika, dengue, yellow fever, chikungunya. All of them come from this one stealthy species. What makes Aedes aegypti so dangerous isn't just the viruses it carries, it's how well it hides. It thrives in urban environments, nesting in places we never expect: flower pots, gutters, soda bottle caps. It doesn't swarm, it doesn't hum. It sneaks in, bites during the day, and disappears. It's the perfect vector, said a Miami public health official. You never hear it coming, and it's evolved to resist us. Over the years, Aedes aegypti has developed strong resistance to chemical insecticides. Sprays that used to work are now nearly useless. The mosquito's genetic diversity allows it to mutate fast. With every failed pesticide drop, it gets stronger, smarter, harder to kill. In 2009 and 2010, Florida saw major outbreaks of dengue, with hundreds infected and neighborhoods shut down. Public health officials called it a crisis. That's why scientists are now looking to genetics. The old tools, fogging, spraying, larvicides, can only go so far. To fight Aedes aegypti, you have to beat it at its own game, and that means targeting its genes, not just its body. This mosquito doesn't fear chemicals, one researcher said, but it has no defense against its own DNA. We're not trying to kill all mosquitoes, said a Florida health officer. We're trying to stop the one that's killing us. But even with all its dangers, not everyone agrees with genetic modification. Some say it's a slippery slope. Others say it's the only path forward. The next chapter unpacks the scientific reasoning and the desperate logic that drives this controversial war on genes. Playing God or saving lives? The line between innovation and interference is thin, but to many scientists, the answer is clear. We've tried everything else, and nothing has worked. Genetic modification isn't a wild experiment anymore. It's becoming the last viable tool in a fight we've been losing for decades. Traditional control methods, sprays, standing water control, larvicides, have failed to keep up with rising infection rates. In densely populated subtropical places like Florida, mosquito outbreaks have become seasonal threats. Zika in 2016, dengue resurgences, chikungunya scare zones, and every year the cost in medical bills and containment efforts grows. Genetically modified mosquitoes offer something new, a species-specific weapon. They don't harm bees. They don't poison water. They don't require people to evacuate neighborhoods. In Brazil, trials showed an 80% drop in mosquito populations. Some cities went from thousands of breeding sites to near zero in under a year. It's not just effective, said a Brazilian entomologist. It's scalable, fast, and clean. Still, there are risks. No system is perfect. No release comes without uncertainty. But many researchers argue the alternative is worse. Viral outbreaks, collapsing healthcare systems, and decades more of chemical warfare. We can wait and suffer, one geneticist said, or we can try to shape the future before the future shapes us. To these scientists, the choice isn't about control, it's about survival. They're not playing God. They're trying to stop a plague, one gene at a time. Gene drives are controversial, said an Oxford epidemiologist, but epidemics don't ask for permission either. But what happens when nature doesn't play along? When genes mix in ways we didn't plan for? The next chapter reveals what could happen when modified mosquitoes start writing their own rules and possibly become stronger than ever before. When nature fights back. In theory, the Oxitec mosquito plan is simple. Release modified males, eliminate their daughters, and repeat until the population crashes. But biology rarely sticks to the script. What happens when genes mix in ways we didn't plan for? What if instead of wiping out Aedes aegypti, we help it evolve? That's the concern now being raised by independent scientists. Some data hints that hybrid mosquitoes, part wild, part modified, may be showing up in release zones. These hybrids could, in theory, inherit traits that make them harder to kill, or even better at spreading disease. You're messing with the code of a survivor, said one biologist, and it's already had millions of years to adapt. One 2019 study in Brazil reported the detection of genetically mixed mosquitoes in release areas. Oxitec disputed the implications, arguing that the hybrids didn't persist. But other researchers warned that genetic mixing could lead to gene escape, where modified traits spread uncontrollably through the ecosystem. If the lethal gene mutates, it might stop killing and start doing something unpredictable. There's also concern about tetracycline contamination. In farming areas where this antibiotic is used in livestock, it could unintentionally neutralize the gene, allowing female offspring to survive in the wild. It's a loophole, warned one environmental toxicologist. A hole in the shield, and we don't know how wide it is. In the end, nature doesn't follow instructions. Genes mutate, conditions change, and once released, there's no rewind button. Modified mosquitoes don't carry warranties. They just carry risks and momentum. You don't get to edit evolution, one ecologist said. You just get to start the next chapter and hope you like where it goes. And behind this global experiment is a company with global reach. It's not just about science anymore. It's about business. And the deeper you look into Oxitec, the more blurred the line between innovation and profit becomes. Who is Oxitec? Oxitec began in the early 2000s as a research spin-out from Oxford University, a scrappy team of molecular biologists with a bold idea: edit mosquitoes, control disease. But over time, the company evolved away from academic underdog to global biotech power player. And like any powerful firm, its motives are now under the microscope. In 2015, Oxitec was acquired by Intrexon, a US-based synthetic biology conglomerate. The goal? To scale fast. Intrexon poured money into trials, pushed for regulatory approvals, and positioned Oxitec as a public health hero. But critics say the rapid expansion came at a cost: transparency. This is no longer just about science, said a former employee. It's about contracts, shareholders, and the next funding round. Oxitec insists its technology is safe for humans, animals, and the environment. It points to years of testing, EPA approvals, and multiple successful trials. But independent peer reviews are limited, and conflicts of interest run deep. Many of the glowing reports on efficacy come from scientists either funded by or affiliated with the company. Meanwhile, Oxitec is winning global contracts, with programs now operating or proposed in the US, Brazil, Panama, and Africa. Each deal is worth millions. And while the mission may be to save lives, it's also about scaling biotech. That dual purpose, humanitarian and commercial, makes some observers uneasy. When disease control becomes a market, warned one journalist, you start asking who the customer really is. The question isn't whether the science works, it's who controls the science and how decisions are made when public health and private profit collide. They're selling mosquito extinction as a product, one biotech ethicist said. But nature's not a customer, and it doesn't read contracts. Despite the controversy, Oxitec's mosquitoes are on the move, across borders, across continents. The quiet Florida release was just the beginning. What started in backyards is now a worldwide rollout, with each country weighing the same risk: save lives now or hesitate and pay the price later. From Brazil to the Keys. The Florida Keys weren't the first test site, and they won't be the last. Before the US gave the green light, Oxitec had already been experimenting in Brazil, the Cayman Islands, Panama, and Malaysia. Each trial zone had its own fears, challenges, and lessons, but the results were too promising for officials to ignore. In Campinas, Brazil, a city once plagued by dengue, the release of genetically modified mosquitoes led to an 80–90% drop in breeding sites. Some neighborhoods reported near eradication of the Aedes aegypti population. The success gave Oxitec momentum and headlines, but it also raised questions about long-term sustainability and monitoring. The trial ended, but would the mosquitoes stay gone? In the Cayman Islands, early trials faced heavy backlash from residents who feared unknown consequences. In Malaysia and Panama, regulatory frameworks were less established, making some critics worry about oversight. Still, results were consistent: localized population crashes followed by a slow genetic fade-out. It worked, at least on paper. In the United States, the EPA approved mosquito trials in Florida, Texas, and California. Releases began in Florida first, with Texas following. But California hit pause, citing environmental concerns and pressure from scientists demanding deeper review. In a state known for both innovation and caution, the program remains on hold. And now the next frontier is Africa, where different species of mosquitoes spread malaria, still one of the deadliest diseases on the continent. New genetic strategies are being tailored to target these vectors. The mission is expanding fast. This is global gene deployment, said one international health expert, and it's happening faster than the public realizes. But even as the program expands, one question keeps rising. What are we actually removing from nature? Is this just pest control, or are we pulling out threads in an ecological web we don't fully understand? Can we afford to erase a species? Mosquitoes are annoying. They bite. They spread disease. And in the case of Aedes aegypti, they kill. But what happens when we deliberately push a species toward extinction? It's easy to cheer when mosquito populations crash. It's harder to ask what disappears with them. There are over 3,500 mosquito species worldwide. Fewer than 100 spread diseases. Most are harmless, many are native. But Aedes aegypti is not native to Florida. It was brought from Africa centuries ago, stowed away in trade ships. It's invasive, aggressive, and unnatural to this environment. Removing it may restore balance, or it may create new imbalance. The short-term impact of removing one mosquito species is unclear. Some scientists argue it would have little effect. Frogs, birds, bats, and fish all eat mosquitoes. But their diets are flexible. They'll shift. Others aren't so sure. In some ecosystems, mosquito larvae play a role in nutrient cycling, supporting aquatic life. The ripple effect might not be seen for years. There's also concern about ecological replacement. If Aedes aegypti vanishes, will another species take its place? Possibly one even more resistant or harder to control? Nature doesn't leave empty niches for long. We might wipe out one problem only to make room for another. And once a species is gone, it's gone. There's no undo button for extinction. Scientists admit we don't really know the long-term consequences. We're operating in uncharted territory, editing ecology with tools we're still learning how to use. The danger isn't what we do, said one conservation biologist. It's what we don't predict. Mosquitoes might be a plague, said one ecologist, but they're still part of the system. And every system has a breaking point. Still, the war against mosquitoes hasn't stopped at genetics. Around the world, researchers are unleashing drones, microbes, even perfume. Because if this is a war, we're fighting it with everything we've got. Microbes, drones, and perfume. Gene editing isn't the only weapon in this war. As mosquitoes evolve, science is evolving too, turning to microbes, machines, and even cosmetics in the battle for control. If there's one truth in this fight, it's that innovation is coming from every direction. One of the most promising tools is a bacteria called Wolbachia. This naturally occurring microbe, when injected into mosquitoes, makes it impossible for them to carry viruses like Zika or dengue. It doesn't kill the mosquito, it just blocks its ability to infect. This strategy has already shown success in Indonesia, Australia, and Fiji, where drones release Wolbachia-infected mosquitoes into dense neighborhoods. In the lab, researchers are also experimenting with genetically modified skin bacteria, a kind of wearable protection. These microbes are engineered to release mosquito-repelling compounds, offering days of defense without the need for sprays. And yes, even fashion has joined the fight. Studies have found that Victoria's Secret bombshell perfume contains unexpected compounds that repel mosquitoes as effectively as DEET, for reasons scientists are still figuring out. There's also growing interest in acoustic weapons, devices that use sound to disrupt mosquito behavior or reproduction. These are still in the prototype stage, but field trials are underway. We're not just targeting the body anymore, said one entomologist. We're targeting behavior, chemistry, biology, everything. It's a global arms race. Researchers, governments, and biotech startups all racing against time to beat a tiny, adaptive killer. Every year, over 700,000 people die from mosquito-borne diseases. For scientists, that number is not just a statistic, it's a deadline. This isn't about killing bugs, said one World Health Organization advisor. It's about innovation versus extinction. And right now, innovation is just barely keeping up. But with so many weapons now in play, genes, bacteria, chemicals, machines, one question keeps coming up. What could go wrong? What are the unanswered questions no one wants to confront? What could go wrong? For every breakthrough in mosquito control, there's a shadow, an untested edge, a risk no one can fully predict. Because the deeper we go into genetic warfare, the more we realize how little we know about the systems we're trying to reshape. Could modified females survive and bite people? Oxitec claims their sorting systems are nearly perfect, but nearly isn't 100%. What happens if a few modified females escape, breed, and pass on altered genes? Could we accidentally create harder-to-kill mosquitoes, immune to both genes and chemicals? There's also the risk of environmental tetracycline exposure. In areas near livestock farms, where the antibiotic is used in animal feed, traces of it can leak into water systems. That could disable the kill gene, allowing modified mosquitoes to survive and breed in the wild. A loophole, an unintended consequence, and a reminder that ecosystems don't read instruction manuals. Another fear is gene drive resistance. Over time, mosquitoes might evolve mechanisms to block or suppress the inserted genes on bums. Or worse, they could incorporate them in unexpected ways, creating hybrids we can't control. Evolution doesn't play fair, and nature always finds a way to adapt. But perhaps the biggest unanswered question is oversight. Who monitors global gene release? Who ensures independent reviews? Who is accountable if something goes wrong on a global scale? As one bioethicist put it, this isn't just about one company or one country, it's a planetary experiment. And right now, no one's steering the ship. The science is ahead of the policy, said a UN biotechnologist, and the risks are riding in the back seat. With so many unknowns, why keep going? Because for some, there's simply no other option.